Well, hello, and welcome. And so I'm going to be talking about a movie that I saw last year, and I kind of thought about it again, and I rewatched recently. And the movie is called Violet Evergarden, Eternity and the Autumn Memory Doll. I think that's the full name of the movie. Now, before this, I didn't really know, what was it about because it is a series. Um, not this. This is the movie, but there's an actual series on Netflix which I never watched, but it's one of those series and this movie as well, where things that were recommended to me by Netflix, but I never got around to watch. I would just see them recommended, but it didn't draw my attention to go. Okay, I'm gonna actually sit down and watch this. And then, well, obviously, last year with the whole um, lockdown and whatnot, I'm here in the U.S. Then I was doing schoolwork and I was doing other work here at home, so I had time to actually sit down and watch the movie. I still haven't watched the series, but I decided just to watch the movie while I was having lunch, and it wasn't what I expected. I expected to just watch 15-20 minutes, just eat my lunch and then kind of rest a bit before going back to work. I sat down and watched the whole hour and a half. And it's not a long movie. I mean, an hour and a half, that's a it's a decent movie. It's long enough to be called a movie, but it's not actually that long. Now, enough rambling about the whole thing. I'll just say that from a perspective of somebody who hasn't watched the series and who doesn't have the whole context behind each and one of the characters that are present, I'll just say that this is not one of those movies that you have to watch the series first to understand. I imagine it does provide a little bit more context to the characters, but as somebody who is not familiar with the series, that just watched the movie, it really was easy to follow, and they do give you kind of like hints to Violet's past, and it's not going to spoil the movie if you're not familiar with the series. If you're not familiar with the characters, that's okay. I mean, I found it was fine to follow along. Now, having said that, the movie consists of basically two parts. The first part is with a young girl called Isabella York, and Violet Evergarden. She is actually tasked with being, in a certain way, being like a tutor to her, not just in school subjects, but also in how to be a lady. Now, Isabella York, she's at one of those all girls school where no boys are allowed and they have their own dorms and everything. So that's kind of like the type of setting. Basically, the girls in this school are getting ready to get married eventually, and married into families of wealth, families of power, and of course, there are certain expectations. How to eat properly, how to stand up. There's even a scene where they have to do the typical stack books on top of their heads to make sure that they're straight. That type of thing. And so that's like the type of thing that's going on. Now, Isabella York, she's not the typical girl from a wealthy family. What we learn from her past, because in this first part we do go back and, well, actually, during the whole movie we go back and forth between past and present. And so Isabella's past is she was born she wasn't raised by her parents. Apparently, she was raised in the streets. And it was one of those times where it was winter. They had been they had gone through a period of war, the whole country. And so obviously in the aftermath of war, there's going to be some recovery, there's going to be some poverty, there's going to be suffering, because war brings destruction, not just of property, not just of resources, it also brings destruction of people. and it really is a high demand. It's not just the war is over, everybody's in peace, we're all alive. It does get more complicated because now you need to fulfill roles of businesses that are no longer being engaged. You need to find where is the money to get food, to get water, for everything. So it does become this task of survival, even after the war is over. And that's what happened with Isabella York, or I think her name was Amy Bartlett, while she was in the streets. Now, she one day found a little girl, an orphan, just like her, much younger, and she decided to kind of take her in as her adopted sister. And so she had been taking care of her sister. Now, the thing is that she had been taking care of her as best she can. Even to the point that even when she was sick, she would still go ahead and go out to work. Now, we're not really sure what she's sick of. They never really specify it. The only thing we know is that when there's exertion, she gets easily into these fits of coughing, especially at nighttime, which will wake her up and then it won't let her sleep. Now, one day, this kind of gentleman, if you can call him that, along with a few others, they go into her home, and they're well dressed, well presented, and he just out of the blue says, "You're my daughter, we're gonna go," and leave the girl behind. I'll pay for her, well, she's gonna be well cared for, but you're coming with me. And so she had to leave. She had to leave the little girl, which is sad because she was getting close to her as she wasn't close to anyone, and all of a sudden they're being stripped away from one another. And so you can see that when she was taken and placed into this boarding school for all girls, you can see that there's some adjustment, not just in behavior, because now she has to learn how to be a proper lady, and I put proper in air quotes. She also has to learn how to behave like a lady, what's expected of her, which makes her sad because she feels that she can't leave, she can't move, she's stuck, and that makes her sad. She's alone, that makes her sad because she's stripped away from the only family she had, that little girl, which her name is Taylor. And so when Violet is, she's trained her how to be a proper lady, what are the attitudes she should take, what are the, how to dance, how to eat properly, all these type of things, as well as catching up on her studies, because obviously she hasn't been in school for that long, so she needs help before she actually goes and becomes a debutante, which I would, if I had to explain what it was, because I had never heard of that, it would seem to me kind of like a what used to be quinceañeras, which was basically being presented to society as, a lady who is ready for wedding or ready for marriage, that type of thing. Now, as I said, this brings her a lot of sadness, but she also was a little bit resistant at first with Violet, because she's saying, well, she looks like she's a proper lady, she looks like she's just like the rest of the girls, what do I do? And then after that it became, well, she's perfect at everything, Violet is, and she just becomes jealous. But as Violet says, she was raised to be a human weapon. She was raised in the military. She was trained under strict conditions. So you can tell that she has a very tight discipline. And that's what it shows. And that's what everybody sees. Even to the point that they call her Lady Knight. That should tell you a lot. Well, we finished this first part with they have a ball again. There's no men allowed, so it's just the ladies there. She dances one last time with Violet, and before Violet leaves, she helps Isabella with one more thing, which is writing a letter for her little sister, her sister Taylor, because the part of the deal was that she was going to be taken to the boarding school, be raised as a proper lady, and that Taylor was going to be looked after, but she couldn't see her anymore. And so, because of that, well, it's obvious that she can't just leave the boarding school to say hi to Taylor. And so, Violet helped Isabella write out a letter to show her emotion, to show and say what she really needs to say. The second part, we see what appears to be a small boy on a boat. The boy gets off the boat and is walking around the city looking for the postal service. This boy finally finds the postal service and does not reveal his name up until he finds one postman, deliveryman, well, however you want to call them. Uh, he found one worker in particular and said, "Hey, older brother." Now, it needs to be said and it needs to be clarified. This is not a boy, and they're not brothers. This is actually Taylor. Taylor had left the orphanage in order to look for that same delivery man who had delivered the letter from Isabella years prior, and it might have been a couple of years or a few. That letter that Isabella had typed with the help of Violet. Well, this guy was the one who delivered that letter to her in the orphanage. And apparently she had been having the nuns read that letter over and over and over again to remind her of her sister, to remind her of Isabella, or Amy as she knew her. And so what she wanted to do is become a postman as well, because when he delivered her the letter, it meant so much to her. It also meant happiness. And so she decided, well, I also want to deliver happiness. Small detail, she doesn't know how to read or write, so that's quite an adventure. And we see that in her tale, she was stripped away from Isabella, and in the orphanage, she really, she's really sad because she had no parents. She finally had somebody who was like family, and then they were taken away. Obviously, that's going to be tough on a child. And so now she wants to find Isabella. The reason why she is there in particular is because when Isabella's letter was delivered, Violet had also written another letter to go along with it. And in that letter, Violet had told Taylor that if she ever left the orphanage and needed help, to come find her. Well, she left before her time, right? But she did technically walked away from the orphanage and went straight to her because she wanted to find Isabella. Now, throughout the whole film, or the second part at least, they do have somebody who is looking for information, because once Isabella got engaged and got married, they lost track of her. And so they no longer know who she was. Because of course, when she takes the name of her husband's family, now she's no longer Isabella York. She's going to be Isabella something else. And so they do go into this kind of little... It's kind of like a very fun adventure, because Violet teaches Taylor how to read and write. The guy is reluctant at first to have her help, But then, he does help her find Isabella, and then takes her to, I mean, yeah, to Isabella, and does actually take Taylor to Isabella. So yeah, you can see that there's a lot of love in this story. In the end, uh, Taylor, again, with Violet's help, typed up a letter, and since they knew where Isabella was, they took the letter to her, the guy and Taylor. However, Taylor never went out to meet Isabella. She stayed behind, watching Isabella read her letter. In that letter, she basically told Isabella that she would always remember her sister. Now, after that, Isabella says that she's going to write a letter and they will need to be delivered. The guy walks back, now ready to leave. And, he just tells the girl, he tells Taylor, I hope you don't regret not having gone to say hi to her, hug her, or, show yourself to her. She said that was fine. Taylor was contented that she will be the one to deliver her own letters in the future when she was old enough to actually start working as in the postal service. In her conclusion of her part, she got adopted by the Evergarden family. I do not know if they have anything to do with the postal service or with Violet Evergarden, but she gets adopted. And one of the final scenes is that she's still learning how to read and write. And Isabella, in her wedding gown, goes to a lake, yells out Taylor's name, and Taylor somehow senses that her name is being called out. There's no actually sound that's carried over, but there is that sensation that somebody's calling out to her. What I gotta say is that this is a beautiful film. There's no action to it, but it's very clean. It's very innocent. There's no funny business going on. By this, I mean, it's very easy to, when you're making a fictitious world, following the aftermath of having years and years of war, to have people engaged in, illegal fights, illegal substances, prostitution, all of this. I would consider this film to be very much family friendly. There are a few scenes where there's like bath scenes, but they're not sexualized in any way. And everything is covered up, you don't see anything. And it's more about the conversation that they have. And, just to give an example, between Isabella and Violet in their bath scene, we get to see how Isabella, she wants human contact. She's not isolating herself because she wants to be alone. It's just that she doesn't know how to socialize with other people. Her only interactions have been for business, when she was living in the streets, and with her adopted sister. She has nobody else to interact with. She doesn't know how to be a girl of her age. And so with Violet, she kind of opens up to her. And Violet, who also appears to be awkward and just does what she needs to do to perform her role, to perform a job, she also begins to kind of learn how to love. Now, I don't say love in a romantic sense. There is kind of like a flashback that she has where one thing that, or actually it's somebody else's flashback, but it involves her basically saying, I want to know the meaning of somebody saying I love you. That tells us that Violet Evergarden, she is not somebody who was raised with emotions or raised with affection. So love and all forms of love are kind of foreign to her. And even when she appears to get along with the rest of her co-workers and the rest of the other dolls that there are, she still appears to lack that sense of connection, that deeper bond with another human being. And we see that with Isabella. She kind of starts comprehending what it means to actually form that type of bond. And again, it's not about love in the sense of a romantic relationship, it's the love of family, friends. That love that you share with another person. Again, this film is beautiful. Well, to me, it is beautiful to watch, and even the music is wonderful. But I will say, as a disclaimer, I would recommend watching this with headphones or with a good pair of either like a newer TV with a good set of speakers or a good speaker system, because the TV I have, it was kind of peaking very easily, but that's because the TV I have is I wouldn't say from 2010, so it's kind of old. And so yeah, there's there are these moments where the orchestra kicks in, and so it can really fill up, but it's a beautiful sound. And so especially there's a dancing, well, the dancing that I mentioned where Isabella dances with Violet. I recommend watching with a good speaker or with headphones. You won't regret it. And again, you don't have to watch the series to understand what's going on. The only thing I do kind of wish was a little bit different was that Taylor not stay behind and actually show up and say hi to Isabella so that they can have their moment of being united once again. Or I would even say, you know, now that she's married, now she can perfectly adopt Taylor and have her live together. But I mean, that's just me. That's kind of like the direction I would have taken. But it's still a good film. What I will say is that, well, Taylor's was a good story. You know, it really does have a good conclusion to it. I do still kind of feel for Isabella. Isabella ends with a high note because now that she knows that Taylor is still thinking of her and that there is a way of contacting her once again, she still has this visage of not being where she wants to be. I mean, from the beginning, we know that she wants that sensation of being free, and actually, that's one of the reasons why she was jealous of Violet, because she perceives Violet as being able to travel wherever she wanted and being wherever she wanted to be. Which it's not that true. I mean, for work reasons she can, but anyway, it's more freedom than what she was living in the school. And so, not only that, but she knows that the reason why she's at the school is that there's going to be a suitor in the future. She needs to be prepared so that she's fit for marriage. And when she becomes marriage, she's going to be she's once again going to be trapped. She's going to be locked in a place and won't be able to leave or move anywhere. And that's kind of like the saddest part, because it's kind of like seeing this bird who wants to fly in the sky, be free, but instead they're locked in a cage. And that's the sense that you get from her. I don't think that she had, well, for me, I didn't perceive her conclusion as a happy ending or as high as a note as Taylor. But at least it's kind of bittersweet because she's still trapped against her will, but she's still trapped. However, she now knows that Taylor, where she is, and that she'll be contacting her and she can contact her back. That there is a way of contacting Taylor, the only family she has. And so, yeah, I mean, that's all I've got to say. It's a beautiful film. It has a beautiful music that I do recommend listening. It is worth it listening in headphones or in the capacity that you can actually hear the sound well. And you know, it's very relaxing. It's a very relaxing film. It's not, it doesn't have the action of, you know, blood and here's a sword and here's a gun and this and that. It's just a relaxing film about bonds that you make, family bonds, friendship, and what it means to stay in contact with somebody even though you're not together, even if you're not in the same place. You can still have that connection with another person. That's all I have to say. I've gone long enough. Take care, leave a comment, be nice to one another. You never know what another person is going through.